Hello, I'm Doug Watches. Welcome to the Locksmith DVD training program. The subject of this course is lockpicking. There are many situations where as a locksmith you will need to be able to pick a lock open. Most of the time when a customer calls a locksmith, it is because they cannot get into their house or their business. The keys may be inside the building or they've been lost. Either way, it may be necessary for you to pick the lock open to get into the building. Customers may also bring locks into your shop and ask you to make a key for them. And in that situation, the lock may need to be picked open also. Lockpicking is an essential skill for a locksmith. The better you are at it, the more confidence you will have in your ability to deal with lockouts. In this course, I will explain the structure of a pin cylinder lock along with some basic terminology. Review the most common tools used for lockpicking and demonstrate different techniques for picking a lock. We will also look at the concept of bumping a lock open. Course objectives. After completing this course, you should be able to 1. Explain how a pin cylinder lock works. 2. List the basic parts of a pin cylinder lock. 3. Explain the theory of lockpicking. 4. List 4 elements used in lockpicking. 5. List the most common tools used in lockpicking. 6. Explain how to pick a pin cylinder lock, a wafer lock, and a tubular lock. 7. List 4 different types of tension used in lockpicking. 8. Explain how a manual pick gun works. 9. Explain how an electric pick gun works. 10. Explain how a plug spinner works. 11. Explain how to make and use a bump key. 12. Explain that Kwikset makes more than one version of their smart lock. 13. Give a brief history of the lever lock. This course is divided into 14 parts. Part 1, how pin cylinder locks work. Part 2, tools used in lockpicking. Part 3, the theory of lockpicking. Part 4, lockpicking demonstration. Part 5, plug spinner. Part 6, manual pick gun. Part 7, electric pick gun. Part 8, bump keys. Part 9, advanced lockpicking. Part 10, picking wafer locks. Part 11, picking tubular locks. Part 12, Kwikset smart locks. Part 13, suggested practice. Part 14 is a bonus section on the history of locks. Part 2. Okay, the way a lock works is, for a common lock, it's fairly simple. We have pins inside this plug. The first pins on the bottom are called bottom pins. There's also pins on top of those that are called top pins. And when there is no key in the keyway, the top pins will come down and block this shear line right here so that this plug cannot turn. There are springs on top of the top pins that push them down. I have a drawing here. I want to just show the inside of a pin cylinder. This one has 5 pin stacks. Some have 6. They could be from 4 to 7 or 8 or more depending on the manufacturer and how sophisticated the lock is. But this drawing here we have 5 pin stacks. The bottom pin is called, just said, it's called a bottom pin or a lower pin. The upper pins are called top pins or upper pins, and then each stack will have a spring that's pushing that down. And what keeps the lock locked is this spring is going to push this down so that this top pin is blocking the chamber and the plug cannot turn. If you put the key in, as in this drawing here, the key has picked this lower pin up to where the top of the lower pin is even with the shear line. This is the shear line right here. The top of the plug is the shear line. Notice the key is cut deeper here because the pins are different sizes. So the object of the key is to raise all of the lower pins to the shear line. So the top of the bottom pins are at the shear line and the bottom of the top pins is at the shear line. So you basically have a gap there, and now the plug can turn. So with picking a lock, that's what we're going to do. We're going to raise the pins one at a time and try to trap the top pin above the shear line. And if we can get all 5 top pins trapped above the shear line, then the plug will turn and we can open the lock. Here's a diagram that shows the plug actually turning, and you can see the 5 lower pins are held even at the top of the shear line, and you can see the bottom of the top pins is at the shear line. This is a brand new quickset deadbolt purchased in September of 2016. If you have a quickset lock on a door, there'll be 2 screws. This is a deadbolt lock, obviously. There'll be 2 screws from the inside that hold the lock on. You just unscrew those 2 screws. You can take the lock off, and it will come apart like this. Okay, this is basically the locking cylinder here. As we go through the course, I'm going to talk about the part that holds the pins as the plug, and whatever that goes into, I'm going to call it the shell. So then whatever that fits into, for example, that fits into this piece here, I would call that the housing. So for this course, we want to make sure we know the name for the plug, the shell, and the housing. And then also a couple of other terms that I'd like you to be familiar with at this point. This cap here that covers the springs, often referred to as a spring cap or a pin cap. And then another piece that's on the back here, this is a tail piece, and when you turn the plug, it has to do something to either lock or unlock the door. So this is going to move a bolt or a latch of some type, and this is one way to do it with a tail piece. Other locks that we're going to see will have a cam that will be screwed to the back of the plug. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take this clip off the back. There's a C-clip on it. And then we can get the tail piece off. And at this point, if we put the key in the plug and turn it, the plug will come out. You'll see that it moves a little bit. It's moving in there. The reason that it won't come out right now is the pin stacks are holding the plug in there. You can see if I take a key and put it in there and turn it, that it will start to come out. Now we don't want to just pull it out because all of our top pins and springs will fly out. So the reason that I'm asking that you look for one of these locks is you can simply, if you don't have a follower, you can just take this metal cap off and take the pins out, fix it like you want it, and put the cap back on without having a follower. If you happen to have a follower, then you can turn the key, and I normally turn the key to the 3 o'clock position, just so I always know basically which way the pins are turned. And then you just take a follower and push that out. You have to keep it tight against the end of the plug, see, so there's no gap in there. And this way my pins come out. I have this facing up so they don't all fall out. If I turn this over, they're going to fall out. And with the follower in here, it's holding the top pins and springs up inside the shell of the lock. Now you can see with the key inserted into the plug, all of the bottom pins are flush with the top of the plug with the shear line. If I take them out, you'll see they drop down. Now they've all dropped down inside the plug. And if this were still in the shell, the top pins would be pushed down on top of these and blocking the plug from turning. So if I put the key back in, you'll see that once the key's all the way in, again they are flush here with the top of the plug at the shear line. Okay, so that's what we were seeing in the drawings. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this back in. And I want to show you that we can take this cap off and we can get our pins out. But what I'd like you to do is take out the two back pin stacks. Now you want to keep them in order so that you can put them back in and they will still work with the key that you have for the lock. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put this clip back on the back just to hold the plug in there, and then we're going to just take in a screwdriver and pry the cap up carefully now, because the springs can fly out also. So you see one's trying to come out here already. Try not to bend them. Just take your time, go in there, and again, make sure it doesn't go flying off. Take this metal cap off. Okay, you take the cap off, you can see all of the springs. And what I'd like you to do is just take out the two back ones. So I'm going to take the very back one, the number 5 chamber, take the spring out, and then I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to dump the top pin and the bottom pin out. Okay, they're not wanting to just slide out. Sometimes they will. I'm keeping my thumb or finger over the rest of the chambers because I don't want them all to come out. Okay, you can see here that it's starting to come out. This is the pin stack out of the number 5 chamber. We have the spring, the top pin, and the bottom pin. The top pins are going to normally be flat on both ends. We'll talk about different types of top pins later, but your standard top pins are flat on both ends. And then your bottom pin will normally be rounded on one end, and the rounded end will go down towards the keyway. With this particular pin here, this pin has the rounding on both ends. And so it could go back into the plug either way. But what I'd like you to do is go ahead and take out the number 5 pin stack and the number 4 pin stack, and then put the cap back on the lock and try to, as we start to pick the locks, just try to practice with 3 pins in the lock. And then once you're able to pick the lock with just 3 pins, then put the 4th pin stack back in and pick it with the 4 pin stacks in there, and then go to 5. Now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the lock, and all of the locks that I pick in the video will all have 5 pins. If it's a 6-pin lock, it'll have 6 pins in it. Now I notice on close examination of this pin, this is the bottom pin, that it's actually rounded on both ends. So it really wouldn't make any difference which way this pin goes back into the plug. But normally, especially with replacement pins, that's not going to be the case. This is a replacement pin, and I think you can see that this is much rounder here. This is much more pointed here on this end, and it's flat across this end. So this pointed end would go down towards the key, and the key would come up underneath it and push that up. The flat part would be up and would be hitting against the top pin. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and load this back in. And the way you load it back in, just take your bottom pin, put it back in, and again, if it's pointed on one end, make sure the pointed end goes down. Put your bottom pin in, put your top pin in, and put your spring in there. Okay, once you have your springs in there, take your cap, and your cap you want to, if it got bent, squeeze it back together and put it back into the original shape. Then just very gently put it over the pins, push them all down over the springs and push them down and push it down and make sure that it locks back in. It's on there good. Okay, now I'm going to take this plug out, and again the way I do that, I turn it to 3 o'clock. I'm going to push it out. And I want to just show you that if something happens, you drop the lock and all the pins come out. Just so you don't lose the pins, you can put them back together. You can look at your key and you can see, now if you're not going to use a key, it doesn't really matter. You can put them in there any way you want and just pick the lock back open. But just starting out, it's probably a good idea to have a key that you can turn the lock if you need to. So some of the pins are longer than others, and we'll talk about this more in the next course, but your longest pins are going to go where your deepest cuts are at, like that, and your shorter pins are going to go like this cut here is sticking up the most, and this is our shortest pin right here, so it's going to go right there. The number 1 cut is the deepest, the number 4 cut is the next deepest, but just by trial and error, just put the key into the plug, and we said that the shortest one has to go in the number 3 spot, so put it back in there, and it should be flush with the top of the plug. So you can build your plug back. See, that one doesn't go there. I'm going to put that, it goes in the number 1. It was sticking up. Okay, then we said the number 4 was kind of deep, and that's that one. And then you can see at these pins here, this pin here is actually a little longer. Okay, the shortest one was the number 5. So that would go there, and then this would be the number 2, like so. So they're all back in there. So if you do drop your lock or everything flies apart, just take the plug out, put it together, and then push the plug in, and then you can drop in. If you don't have a follower, you can still just drop in your top pins and springs and put your cap back on, and you'll have it back together. You can see here that this works fine with this key. And we got to put our clip back on, or we could accidentally pull the plug out. When you have the key in there, if the clip is not on the back, it's very easy to accidentally pull the plug out, and then everything does go flying out. So that's the first step then in getting ready to pick the lock, is to understand how the thing works, and I think we explained that, and then to go ahead and take those 2 last pin stacks out, number 4 and 5. Now, one more thing I need to explain right now is about these anti-pick pins. And again, we're looking at a quick set lock that I just purchased today right off the shelf, September 2016, and even though it's an inexpensive lock, it costs like $12. Notice it has these 2 pins here. These are top pins, and these are anti-pick pins. So the number 2 and the number 4 chambers. So you may want to go ahead and examine all of your top pins. And if you find a couple of these, just take those out to get started with, and only use the first 3 chambers with these regular pins. And what I would really recommend is that you look for an older lock, or get yourself some regular top pins and build your lock with all regular top pins, no anti-pick pins, until you get more skilled at lock picking. The anti-pick pins make it much more difficult to pick the lock, and so try to find a lock that doesn't have those, or simply take them out and not use those chambers, or replace those with regular style top pins. Now, as we get started, I'm only going to be picking locks without the anti-pick pins in them. Later in the course, we're going to look at picking locks that have these the anti-pick pins in them. But starting out, the first few locks I do, I'm not going to have any of these in there. we're going to just have regular top pins. Features of the pin cylinder. Most standard residential and commercial locks contain either 5 or 6 pin stacks. A pin stack consists of a spring, a top pin, and a lower pin. Some top pins are designed to make the lock more difficult to pick or bump. Okay, parts of the pin cylinder that we should be able to recognize are the plug, the shell, the housing, pin stacks, the spring retainer or cap, and then the cam or tailpiece. Some pin cylinder locks have a removable spring cap or spring retainer. Quickset is an example of this type of lock. This feature can make the lock easier to rekey. Now, as far as tools, we're obviously going to need some lock picks to pick locks with, and you can either buy a set of lock picks that come in a kit, something like this, or you can buy individual lock picks. This is a set of 20 made by Southern Ordnance, and it's a popular set. There are many manufacturers of lock picks. You can look online or check with your supplier and see what's available. But out of these lock picks, there's basically only 3 or 4 different ones that most locksmiths are going to use. Now, as far as the shapes on the end, these are the 4 most common shapes that are used by most locksmiths. This one here with kind of a S-looking end on it, that is called a rake, and it's quite commonly used. Then the next one is a half diamond. Then we have a hook, and then we have a half ball. And again, there's many other shapes, but what you're going to find, you're probably going to end up like most locksmiths and basically use these 4. The main differences in lock picks are the metal they're made out of and the handles, basically. And you can get just a regular flex steel pick, or you can get a stainless steel pick. You can get stainless steel handles that are like on these Southords, which are nice little handles. You can get plastic handles, or you can get basically just a flex steel with no handle. I prefer to have a little bit of a handle on my picks. Most locksmiths do. Here's an example of one that has a plastic handle. This is a hook pick. I like it real well, and you're going to see me using it in the course to pick some locks. This one is made by Peterson. These are tension wrenches that we use to turn the plug with, and I'll explain all of that in just a minute. But you can see there's different shaped handles. This is one of my favorite that has the turned handle on it so that the flat part of the handle is 90 degrees to the part that goes in the keyway. And then you can get a double-sided tension wrench. You can squeeze this together, and so it will fit different size keyways, but also has some tension to hold it in a keyway. Now, another item that's important and usually comes in a set of lock picks is this item right here. And this is not a pick. Notice how pointed it is here on the end. This is a key extractor. And if you have a broken off key or you have debris in a keyway, you need to clean it out, the extractor can be very helpful in trying to remove the broken key or other debris from a keyway. Here's a drawing that illustrates the use of a key extractor. We go in with the extractor and try to grab the edge of the key, the top edge of the key, and then you're going to have to kind of pick up on this to push these pins up out of your way. At the same time, put pressure on that and then pull that back underneath these other pins. This is another style of key extractor. It's a sawtooth style. It does the same purpose. Again, it's just a different style. Another item you're going to need is a plug spinner. Sometimes a lock will pick easier one direction as opposed to the other. And so maybe you'll pick the lock, say, clockwise, but you have to turn it counterclockwise to actually open it. So you can pick it clockwise and then use the spinner to spin it back to the counterclockwise direction. And again, I'll demonstrate that in the course. It's a plug spinner. Another item I would suggest you pick up is a manual pick gun. This gun will flip the pins You stick the little needle part into the keyway and pull the trigger on it, and it pops the pins up, and it can allow us to pick the lock. And we'll demonstrate this also as we go through the course. Another item you may want to pick up is an electric pick gun. This does the same thing as the manual pick gun, but it can do it much more rapidly, and sometimes will come in handy when everything else fails. Sometimes the electric pick gun will help get a lock opened up. And then one last tool that I want to show is a tubular lock pick. There's a number of companies that make these, and they come in different styles and so on. But this is for picking tubular locks, or what's commonly referred to as an A-style lock. And we will demonstrate this in this course also, how to use this tubular pick tool. Necessary picking tools include a work order form, a pick set which includes a key extractor, a plug spinner, a pick gun, and lock lubricant. The four most common lock picks are the rake, the half diamond, the hook, and the half ball pick. So I have a drawing here, just a simple drawing showing the top of a plug with the chambers, 5 chambers drilled into the plug. And the point here is that no matter how precise they are, they're not going to be perfectly aligned. And because they're not perfectly aligned, now these are exaggerated. They're not going to be this bad. This is just an exaggeration to make the point. But even if they're off just 1 or 2 thousandths, it's going to make a difference. And so what happens is if you put tension on the plug to rotate the plug, the pins inside the chambers will hit against the wall of the shell. And so, for example, in this example, if you turn this clockwise, in other words, it's going to move this over, this one being the furthest to the right, this pin stack would hit against the shell first. And if you lift up on that while holding tension, turning tension on the plug, it will trap that upper pin above the shear line. And so if it traps that one, the next one probably would be this one right here. It looks like it's the next furthest to the right, and then this one, and then this one, and then finally this one. Now if you were rotating it to the counterclockwise, going this direction, then this one here obviously would hit first, probably followed by this one, this one, this one, and this one. So it's the alignment, or we should say the misalignment of these chambers that is going to help us to pick the lock open. There's a drawing that I have showing a tension wrench in the top of the keyway, putting pressure on the plug with a hook pick sliding in the keyway underneath the tension wrench and picking up the pins in the first chamber. Here's a drawing showing the tension wrench at the bottom of the keyway and using a rake pick to rake the picks with, which would be going in, sliding in over the top of the tension wrench. The idea is that we can go into the lock, put tension on the plug so that it tries to turn one way or the other, and then pick these pins up one at a time until the top pin is trapped above the shear line. Possibly we go to the middle pin, the third pin, and we pick it up. We trap its top pin. We may feel the plug move slightly. Then we look for the next pin that might be kind of sticky. Which pin is sticking a little bit? That's the one that will trap next, usually. That's the one that will trap the easiest. So we just go from pin to pin, looking for which one has a little bit of stickiness to it, and we push that one up until all 5 of the top pins are trapped above the shear line. Okay, so I put this plug back into this mortise cylinder, and I want you to notice that the plug will turn a little bit. In the locked position, it will turn slightly. And that's what we're going to use to put the tension on the pins. As As this comes around up here, the side of this plug will press against the pins, and that will allow us to push the bottom pin up, trap the top pin above the shear line, and hold it there. So that's the theory. As you begin your study of lockpicking, recommend first that you take a half diamond or a hook pick and go in and just explore what the pins feel like in the lock. Pick them up, count them, get used to how much tension is on the pin stacks. And once you've done that, then put a little bit of pressure on that plug with your tension wrench, very, very light, and see if you can feel one that's now a little sticky. That's the one that we want to pick up first. I'm going to pick it up and then go to the next one. Now you notice I'm letting the pressure off the tension wrench. If I don't feel what I'm looking for, it's possible I pushed one of the pins too high right off the bat, and it's not gonna unlock. So I let the pressure off and start over. You can hear them drop back down. There it is, just like that. The lock is opened. So that's the theory behind picking locks. We use the following 4 elements to pick locks: knowledge of the locks, manufacturing flaws, design flaws, and lock-picking tools. Please take just a moment to like the video and also subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.